And I'm talking, of course, about the election results of, was it Chapo was roundly defeated. His recall, he was easily recalled. I mean, it's an election that, like, I think, like, I don't know, 50,000 people voted in. But of those who did vote, he was washed. It was not close. And, of course, that this is an occasion for reflection or on, the media campaign and to, portray San Francisco as some kind of lawless hellhole. But also, like the limits of pointing out hypocrisy. Because I was like, just trying to think about all this. And yeah, like you can say that, like, yeah, crime was in every respect higher in the 1990s, but it feels worse now. And you can point out like the irrationality of that. But like, again, it only takes you so far. And I think this really does get into this sort of having to take seriously. And I'm not saying this to be glib or ironic, but like to take seriously the forces of vibes in like how people perceive reality. Because the thing is, like, anecdotally and statistically, like whether it's New York City or San Francisco, like street crime and quality of life crimes were higher in the 90s. But the 90s were an era that was like the last golden age. The 90s are an era when people like believed in a future. So when they were mugged on the street, it was easier to just sort of like shrug off and just be like, them's the breaks. And like, it's not the end of the world. But like, now well into the 21st century, and especially as well, like in the context of COVID lockdowns and people being indoors more than ever, reality really is what people feel it to be. And there's no really, and especially if you're running for office or trying to defend a political program that people are blaming for why they feel so fucked up, you can't just say, well, like you're actually wrong because crime was actually much higher in the 90s and you weren't complaining about it then. Nor can you really notice the fact that like now that Biden's out of office, all of these problems like drug addiction and homelessness will continue to get worse in San Francisco, but no one will complain about it or, be indoors all day on the computer or watching the news thinking about it. So the problem will essentially go away.
I mean, the problem will go away when they get what they really want, which is mass deportation of homeless people out of expensive urban areas. That's the long-term goal. It has nothing to do with really crime as per se. It is that the thing that keeps getting worse, like crime is going up and down. And I do think part of this is relative sense because, yes, crime was much higher in the 90s, but the violent crime boom that began in the late 60s in the United States climaxed in like late 80s, early 90s. So while crime was higher then than it is now, it was also steadily declining throughout the 90s. And we had the historic lows there, or the aughts. Now it's going up, not steadily and not in a smooth way, but like it's jumping up in places. And that's a different feeling than being around a higher total crime that feels like it's going away. So you have that like really getting in people's mind. But the other thing is that the real thing that they're miserable about, and it isn't crime, they're not the victims of crime, usually. It's that they are having to see the real results of the neoliberal era's impact on urban life and the ability of people who don't make six figures to securely live in a city.
I'm like, man, like I think it's among the groups of people who do make six figures are finding out that that's six figures, like they still feel squeezed as hell. And they're getting priced out of places like San Francisco and Manhattan or Brooklyn. And so that what they do have, they feel way more protective of, or that they feel like they're losing it or losing ground is more like profoundly and deeply felt. And yeah, like if you're like work for Chesa or supported the campaign, you can point that like violent crime actually fell during his tenure as DA of San Francisco. But like for the people, like whether it's a media created reality or not, like it's a reality that exists in people's heads. And like, I don't know what the fucking answer to that is. Cause like when you have like sure, it's a well-funded propaganda campaign to convince everyone across the country that every city is like a lawless hellhole. And like, obviously the cruelty and sadism and all that, and the lying is all there. But like, yeah, like the vibes make it so that everyone just feels fucked up and afraid all the time. And it's hard to really gauge like what a kind of, I don't know, any rational political campaign could do to, counteract that.
You'd have to do things that local officials can't do, like build fucking housing in large amounts and give people it, which you couldn't do even if you could do it, because you are undermining like a fundamental social contract that is crucial in like maintaining literal, like the actual capitalist system. Like you have to have homelessness. You have to have the possibility of losing your citizenship in any meaningful sense. No longer being a person like other people. If you don't have a job, that can't go away. So that means you cannot do the thing that would actually solve these problems, like create a large amount of accessible housing, because then unemployment, for example, is not a death sentence. And if it's not a death sentence, then what you're willing to work for, that calculation changes drastically.